Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I should give a shout out to classrooms. We usually have a lot of classrooms across Ontario join us in Canada. We had a big snowstorm last night, and many schools across Ontario are closed. So hopefully you'll catch the recording of the world's most exciting classroom. This is our 71st live event since the Oosterschelde set sail from Plymouth back in August 2023. So hope you're having fun on your snow day. To all the other classrooms who are here with us, thank you so much for hanging out. We have a jam-packed event today. I'm not kidding. We got to get right into it because we have so much to cover in our time together. So the first thing I'm going to do is, as always, we'll share my screen here. I'm going to make it a touch bigger. And let's take a look at the map. So we have lots of new classrooms joining today, or classrooms who haven't joined for a while. So let's catch up a little bit on what's happened over the last 6 weeks or so. During the Christmas holidays, where we kind of took a break, the DARWIN200 team, the crew, spent Christmas and New Year's in Christchurch here in New Zealand on the South Island. After that, it was time for a pretty epic journey crossing the Pacific Ocean over the course of 7 weeks in some of the roughest, the wildest, the stormiest, windiest waters on the planet. So you can see here, the ship didn't take a straight route. There were some up and down, some north and south, and that was usually following different pressure systems, trying to maximize the wind, maybe avoid some of the worst weather. And so here we go. This massive expanse of blue filling your entire screen right now is what they have crossed. Huge milestone rounding the horn of South America here, which is pretty big deal, especially for ships back in the day with no GPS, wooden ships. Yeah, it would have been a lot different, but it's still a huge accomplishment and pretty exciting to do in a tall ship. And they are now days away from reaching the Falkland Islands, and that will be the end of this leg. So we're going to go. We have another live connection right now. I've got Tom and Mara hanging out backstage with me on board the Oosterschelde. So I'm going to bring them in right now. Here we go. Whoops, there we go. Hey, Tom. Hey, Mara. How are you?
Hello, how are you? All good.
All right, good to see you. You look different. You look different since you've rounded the horn.
Do we?
Yeah, you look tougher, more sea hardened or sea worthy. I don't know.
I don't feel it. I feel very cold today.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's different that from when we started, when you guys were hanging out in your t-shirts to now bundled up pretty good in those southern waters. Did you ever have any snow or ice on the ship, or did it not get that cold?
We've had quite a lot of hail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not really snow, I don't think.
I think one group, one of the watches did have a tiny bit of snow just as we were coming to the horn. Actually, I'm not sure. It wasn't like a big snowstorm, but we got a little bit of excitement.
All right. I want to play a few clips here. We have a lot of classrooms joining today. Some for the first time, some after a break. So I want to show just what the conditions got like out on all of them, the 40s and the furious 50s for a reason. You guys got to experience a little bit. I added a little music to this one because the sound was playing funny the last time we played it. So let's take a look at this little clip so classrooms can get a feel for what it might have been like to be out there. Here we go. pretty intense. I think the music helped too to spice it up a little bit. Was that about the worst that you had over the course of the last 6 weeks?
Yeah, by far, yeah.
Yeah. When we went round the Horn 2 days ago, it was nothing like that. Luckily. So.
Yeah. So I've got a little clip of the Horn, and you can still see the boat moving quite a bit. You guys had quite a bit of kind of side to side motion. But before I play that, maybe you can kind of set the stage for us a little bit. What is the Horn, and why was it kind of a big deal?
Did you say that again? Sorry, Joe. You cut out a bit. You got a bit
Yeah, so set the stage for us a bit. What is the Horn, and why is it kind of a big deal to round the Horn?
I mean, it's set within this spot of ocean where the depth of the ocean just rises suddenly, and the land either side just funnels in all this weather. So it's notorious for having these big waves and bad weather that just comes on like in an instant. So that's what it's known for, and there's lots of shipwrecks and stories about all these ships that have gone down, people that have died in the water. So
see how back in the day it would have been very challenging with lots of rocks coming out of the water everywhere. If you don't have all those navigational assets that we have these days, it would be a very different story.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, that's a big reason why the Panama Canal is such an important thing, is we can save a ton of time cutting through, and we just kind of eliminate having to round the Horn at all in most cases by using the Panama Canal. So I've got a little clip from that rounding. So let's take a little look at that clip. And then maybe we'll turn the classrooms loose and we'll see if there's some questions from our groups backstage. So let me grab that clip and let's take a look.
Yeah.
Tom and Marv, if you want to say anything as this is playing, because I know this is a quiet one, if there's anything you want to add.
All right. Apart from that noise, so when the Horn went, that was the moment we were actually rounded the Horn. So the moment we went from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic. Yeah, it's a pretty dramatic landscape for sure. Seeing that on the horizon.
It is a dramatic spot, and pretty cool to be able to blow the horn when you kind of pass that imaginary boundary between the two oceans. Look like it. There we go. Okay, well, the last thing I'll ask you about is the science. How's that been going? Did you manage to get another eDNA sample or two? Have you been seeing any new birds? What's going on?
Yeah, I actually took a eDNA sample at Cape Horn, so we've got a special Cape Horn sample.
Sweet.
And then we've been continuing our bird surveys, and we actually had lots and lots of birds just before we got to Cape Horn, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, 200-300 birds in one survey. It was crazy. And the week before that, we hadn't really been seeing much at all, so that was a nice change.
All right, very cool. Well, while we still have you, I am going to bring some classrooms in. So if you're tuning in via YouTube and you have a question for Tom and Mara, anything about the crossing of the Pacific, what it was like on the ship, that kind of thing, feel free to put into the chat. But I also have a handful of classrooms backstage. So I'm going to bring them in and give them a chance to ask a question or two for the two of you before we jump to another segment in today's event. So let's start off with the Phoenix School. We've got the Phoenix School hanging out with us. How are we doing today, everyone?
They have.
There they are. All right. Does anybody have a question for Tom or Mara about sailing across the Pacific Ocean?
I said we have a question. I said we go for it.
Yeah. What was like the hardest thing about sailing across the Pacific Ocean?
Do you mind repeating
Sorry,
that one?
just cut out.
What was the hardest thing about sailing across the Pacific Ocean?
Very unique experience being away from land for that long. I mean, we only saw land again for the first time 2 days ago after about 40 days at sea. And that's quite a strange experience. Everyone got very excited when we saw land again, and yeah, I don't know. What would you say?
I guess it's like the initial adjustment to
Yeah.
the life on board. Like you have to get used to the seasickness, of course. So you have to get your sea legs, and then obviously the rhythm of being on board and getting into that new sleeping pattern.
Yeah, the watch system. You're tired a lot. Just getting used to the movement, and yeah.
All right. Phoenix School, do you have one more for us before we grab another classroom? I think I see someone. There we go.
I'm Gavin, and I'm in 4th grade. And my question is, was everybody below deck when you crossed Cape Horn? Because in the video that Joe showed, I didn't see that many people.
No, everyone was actually up on deck. It wasn't too rough that day. So when we had the storm, there were a few times where everyone was actually below deck because it was too rough up on deck. But when we rounded the Horn, everyone was able to come up and actually have a look, which was really nice.
Yeah, that would have been a big part of the journey. So I'm sure everybody wanted to be up top for that. And it might have been hard to see them because the drone was kind of far away. So it might have been hard to pick out individual people on the deck. But I bet they were bundled up because, as you mentioned, you guys had some hail recently. And just looking at the two of you, it's a little bit chilly on deck.
Definitely.
All right, let's grab another classroom. We have a group joining us in Portugal today, which is pretty cool. How are we doing today?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Okay, so I'm Miguel, I'm from Portugal, and I wanted to ask 2 questions. Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of them is, how do you like maintain the material in the boat stable, like not moving around with the rough weather during the journey?
Everything's just tied down. So when we're expecting rough weather, it's just you have to get a bit creative, tying things down, stowing things away. Everything's in a cupboard. Everything's got a spot. So
We've got anti-slip mats for the table. It doesn't always work. If it's really rough, we have lost quite a few plates on this journey. Sometimes things do fall down, but yeah.
All right. The second question is, where do you do the experiences? Like you dock the boat and then do your research, or do you take out to the boat and do it there?
So he's wondering that, like the research you're doing on board, are you doing it in the ports, or is it more as the ship is sailing when you're doing the research? How does that happen?
Both. So we're doing some things as we're sailing. So we've been doing a bird survey for for all of the legs so far. We've been continuing as we sailed across the Pacific. So we spent 2 hours each day counting birds and identifying birds, and then we're also taking some environmental. That's the things that we do, and then the rest.
All right.
So we lost the sound for a second, but what they were Mara was saying is the eDNA samples, the environmental DNA. So they can take samples of the water, filter the DNA, and then they're vacuum packing it. And one of our researchers who was on board earlier, I think you got on board in Fiji, we're sending all those samples to him. He can use those samples to see what's been swimming through the water, which is really cool. So you don't have to see what's there. You can look at those DNA samples and see what's been in the water recently. So we've been collecting a string of them ever since Fiji, through New Zealand, Australia, and then back across the Pacific. So pretty cool.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for those great questions. We have one more class hanging out back here. I'm going to bring them in. New Marston, if you're here and you want to unmute your microphone and you have a question or two for Tom and Mara, go ahead. Hey, New Marston.
Hi, can you hear us?
We gotcha.
Hi, we have so many questions, but our best one so far is, what's your favorite thing about living on board the ship?
I think just being out in nature every day, being out in this really wild and crazy environment. It's experience.
yeah. It's surprising how different each day is.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of the ocean. You might think it's be a bit boring, but every time you come off board, it's like something new. There might be a whale, different weather systems.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all right. No, it must be pretty awesome to see the wildlife. I've got a little clip here that I want to play for the classes. So one day before, a few weeks ago, their time zones were so different on the ship, I had to do recordings with Tom and Mara, so I wouldn't drag them out in the middle of the night or really, really early in the morning. And just as one of our recordings was wrapping up, we had, I think there were some beaked whales, 3 beaked whales came. And so Tom sent me a little clip here. So I want to share this little clip so you can see this little group of 3 beaked whales. Let me make sure I pick the right one. There it is. Here we go. So I think that's what it's like out there in the ocean. It's for extended periods of time, you see nothing. Then all of a sudden you get something, the ocean comes to life, and then it's gone again just as quickly. So pretty cool to be able to see these 3 deep diving beaked whales. They're definitely not seen very commonly. So that's a pretty big score. New Marston, do you have one more for us?
Yeah. Our other question was about the wind speeds. Do you record them, and what's the fastest that you've experienced?
Yep, we record the wind speed every hour, I think. And I think fastest we had was during that big storm where Joe showed that footage in the beginning, and that was 10, wind force 10.
Wind force 10, which is 50 knots, and then I think that's about 80 to 90 kilometers an hour, I believe.
Quite windy.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Tom, I bet it's been hard to keep the equipment dry when you're trying to film a little bit on deck.
There's been a lot of cleaning going on.
Yeah, I can imagine. Very cool.
And salt, so yeah, keeping on top of that.
Yeah. Well, it was great to connect with the two of you today. I'm really excited. You're almost in the Falklands, which is a beautiful place, wild biodiversity, so that should be fun. I'll have to get an update on what it's like when you step foot on land, if you're kind of still swaying back and forth and still feel like you're rocking on the boat for a little while.
Sure we will be.
So before we sign off, I have to ask for a view. Can we take a look at what you're seeing right now? Can we get a little pan around? Looks like a few sails up right now as well.
Yeah, we thought we weren't going to have any wind today, but it's actually picked up again, so just set another sail.
I think it's almost all the sails up, is it not?
Yeah, we've got the main up, schooner and the mizzen, and the 2 top sails as well.
Very cool. All right, well, that was great. We had a great group. We had you guys down in the Pacific around South America. I'm in Canada. We've got classrooms in the US, Canada, the UK, Portugal joining us today. So it's a nice little international crew. It's fun to connect this way. All right, enjoy the last few days and then have fun in the Falklands. I'm sure we'll get an update one way or another.
Cheers. Thank you, Joe.
All right, thanks for the last few weeks, guys. It was fun.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Yeah. All right, very cool. So that was our nice live connection. What we're going to do today, I'll just give you a quick rundown. So we have a second event that happens every week. It's the world's most exciting classroom, but it's for classrooms on the other side of the world. So Australia, New Zealand, and places like that. Last night we had a guest. Her name was Kate Leeming. She joined us and she shared a presentation. So I'm going to play that little presentation for you. We also had a Darwin leader join us. Her name's Brigitte. And she joined us in Sydney, and she spent her time in the field on a conservation project looking at gliders. So these are mammals that live up in the trees. They can jump and glide in the air for about 100 meters going from tree to tree, which is pretty cool. We've got our experiments to get to, and we have our curiosity of the week. So lots to get to over the next little bit. So I think I'll start with introducing Kate and playing her interview from last night. So Kate Leeming is Australian. She is an explorer, and she likes to explore on her bike. Now, she has covered over 100,000 kilometers in countries all around the world on her bike. Some of the most remote places on the planet, some of the toughest conditions to cycle through, which is pretty wild, ranging from Siberia to Africa, to Australia, to Antarctica, to Greenland. She's had her bike in some incredible places, sometimes using big fat tires to go off-road and cycle through the snow. So she shares with us a little trip she did. Well, I call it little, but it was over 8,000 kilometers through Australia, through the desert in some pretty crazy conditions. So let's take a little look at that together now.
I'm going to sort of take you across through my journey, and sort of fairly quickly for 8,600 odd kilometers. But you'll get a taste now of what Australia is through some of the most remote parts of the outback. So I began at Cape Byron, which is the most easterly tip of Australia under very leaden skies. And I was very excited, but also organizing these things, it's very difficult and just, it's very stressful actually to pull everything together. It's almost the hardest thing I do. So I was very pleased to get there on the 1st of May in 2021 to start my big bike ride. And quite immediately I was into the mountains. The hilliest part of the whole journey was day one, to get up and over the Great Dividing Range. And there I was I met up with Margaret, who was showing me how she was growing more trees and to protect a wildlife corridor where animals go. Especially that's important because this area has now become prone to having fires. So what she was doing was very special, and it was great to meet different people. And then after 5 days, that land just really flattened out. So the other side of the Great Dividing Range, and it was very fertile land. And I stopped just west of Moree, which was about 570 kilometers from the start, and to meet one of Australia's most, David Statham, who runs Australia's most sustainable cotton farm. Now, cotton uses an awful lot of water, and what was really impressive was all the high tech that he used here to minimize the use of water, and it's totally organic. It was an incredible, really impressive operation, and it was just, it just shows what could be done if people really put an effort in and really cared for the environment around them. Now I'm going quickly across the north of New South Wales. After 1,000 kilometers, I hit Burke, and then this was probably another 300 odd kilometers from there on the way to Tibooburra. Starts getting a little bit rough. Tibooburra itself is known as the place of stones. It was an Aboriginal meeting place where they travelled for long ways, long distances to meet there. It's quite an amazing little outback town just there as well. And I was continuing out towards the border. The border between New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia is called the Corner Country. The roads were quite good to start with. And then basically I had to cross the border into Queensland on this road called the Toonagate Road, which was a little bit of a shortcut to go across the Strzelecki Desert. And it had rained fairly recently, and some of the four-wheel drive tracks drivers had actually sort of driven when they shouldn't on the wet, muddy clay pans and really cut the road up. And there was still a lot of water around. And so I was going along tracks like this, and the vehicle was a long way ahead of me, and I basically fell on this rock hard clay and broke my collarbone. And then I was very shocked, and I'd never done anything like that before. In fact, I'd never really had a broken bone other than a little cracked rib. So I was on my own. I basically was in shock for about 5 minutes. And then I sort of thought I'd better go and see if I can find I keep moving forwards to see if I can find my team, because I didn't know where they were. And I sort of put my hand sort of rested my arm on the handlebars it's a fat bike, so it's very stable. And I rode very slowly until I found them. So that was the end of the expedition for 2021, forced. I went back, I had surgery. It was all fixed 8 weeks later, but I couldn't get out because of the interstate COVID restrictions. That everything was locked, and so I couldn't do the rest of the expedition in 2021. And I came back. But I always like to finish things, and I came back to exactly the same spot in 2023 in beginning of June. The road had been graded, which was a nice surprise. And now I'd planned the rest of the journey. So I had still had about over 700,000 kilometers to go. So setting off, going through, firstly, the Strzelecki Desert. This is a nice made road, but the sand dunes, as you can see, are pretty steep. So it was on day one, that was pretty heavy going, I can tell you. Unfortunately, the rains, which were further north, flooded Eyre Creek, which is that runs all the way down the east side of the Simpson Desert. I was going to cross the Simpson Desert. This was unseasonal. It was in June, and there was no chance of that flooded river being able to cross for another month or so. There was no way I could get through, and so I had to adapt again. I headed south along the Birdsville Track. That was 570 kilometers down there to a place called Marie, and that was sort of down to the bottom of Lake Eyre. But then it really, really rained so much that all the tracks were closed again. So I had to head right down south, right down to the Port Augusta in South Australia. I'll show you a map, but you can see on my little side maps where that is. It was beautiful, but it kind of wasn't what I'd planned. So all the way down and then all the way back up to pretty much where I was as the roads dried out, and then across to Coober Pedy. And then the main support vehicle broke down, and that was like 3 weeks they were out because it was a really major problem. So we're in Coober Pedy for 3 weeks, but we had to make the most of that and met some local people, miners who took us down their special mine. And it was really a good chance to stop and learn a little bit more about what it's like to live in Coober Pedy, where it's so hot that people live underground, and where the temperatures are much cooler and more stable especially during the very hot summers. Now that gave me time to prepare for you can see the little map there that I've put in there. So you can see the yellow was 2021 and the blue. And there we are, and that's where I am at Coober Pedy. And then the next stage, now we're getting really, really remote. I was crossing the Anne Bedell Highway. Now, this isn't your normal highway. This was built by pushing a bulldozer and a grader through the desert in the early 1960s. Or this part of the road, actually, the first little bit was built in about 1953 by a chap called Len Bedell. Anne Bedell was his wife, whom he named the road after. Yeah, it's as rough as it gets. I knew it would be really, really rough. The rest of the highway was really special. This was actually a nice little bit of road, but most of it was really, really sandy and really, really corrugated with that washboard surface. And that's why I needed to use my fat bike. And just veering off that, now I was going down 137 kilometers off the road to visit Junjunjara, which was the second Aboriginal community. They could not believe that I cycled every single part of that road there. But luckily, my fat bike was made for the job, and it's a special one because it's all-wheel drive. So I was just making it up some of those sand dunes there. And these people, this is one of the most remote communities in the country. And normally you can't go there because it's a closed town, but it took me 6 months before the expedition to actually get permission. And they were really welcoming, and the women rangers took me out for a special afternoon, and where I got to chat with them and learn more about them, because these people, they've had a pretty hard time. They originally were in this Great Victoria Desert, and of course I visited the kids. And the last part of my stay, I got to hear their story. And so the elders took me out to a place called the Ration Tree, where basically what happened was that his people were drawn out of the desert. The missionaries used to put food and clothing near a particular tree. This is Ned also telling the story. And that's where the tree is, that dead trunk there. There was a little marker on it that we were looking at there, and that's where it was. So they came out of the desert, they were attracted by that, and then they were taken down to a mission about 600 kilometers away. And only in recent, since the mid 1980s, have they, with their own self-determination, moved back. And so it was a very interesting stay and to hear their stories. But I had to move on, and another 700 odd kilometers across the desert. Yes, there had been some thunderstorms, so it got a little bit messy at times. But again, that's really, a lot of it's really rough road. And then after that, I chose to head up a little section of the rabbit-proof fence. Now, I've put a little map in there for you to see, but basically the rabbit-proof fence was built there in about the early 1900s. The red one was the first one. It was the longest fence in the world at the time, and it was built to try to prevent a plague of rabbits coming over that were introduced in Victoria, actually. But they, strangely enough, they bred like rabbits, and they were very, very destructive. The fence never really worked. They put more fences in. You can see there's actually 2 in rabbit-proof 2 and 3. But I was just doing a little section, which is mostly across station country, ranch country, and it's that's the fence line. That's some of the original fence line. There's no tracks there. It's just I was going just roughshod over the sort of area next to the fence, either side of the fence. This piece I had to do alone because the support vehicles couldn't get through. There were some lakes that had water in, and so they had to drive about 150 kilometers or so around to meet me at another point, and I had to go through. But I didn't know how deep these lakes were going to be, so this was the first one I came across, and I had to navigate my way around. It was quite scary because would have been very easy to get lost out there. The fence, you can see, had fallen down, so this was just a different fence in the station country. Diverted to go past, and in fact I climbed this. This is Mount Augustus, which is the largest rock in the world. And you think of Uluru as being very large, but this is twice the size of that. But it's not as dramatic because it's got a little bit of it's weathered a bit, so it's got a bit of vegetation on it, and it's a slightly different geology to Uluru. And then the last community that I met was right over near the finish in Shark Bay, where I was meeting up with the Malgana people, and these guys had a business where they were protecting Shark Bay, regrowing seagrass, which had been lost because of some heating of the water, some climate events, and they're also setting up a sea cucumber trade. So that was a fantastic visit. And then finally, the last bit, as I said, there's always a sting in the tail. It was all sand. There was big sand dunes. Again, using my fat bike, I finally made it to the finish just on time on the 17th of September in 2023. And it was 8,617 kilometers. So I've just got a little video to show you that's going to sum all this up for you. Here we go. I came up with this plan to cycle from Australia's most easterly tip to its most westerly tip. Final preparations now. I'm pretty excited about the whole thing. It's an adventure, and we'll see what happens. The terrain that we've been traveling through is vast. Around 1,000 kilometers, first 1,000 kilometers of this journey. Yeah, there's just nothing left in the tank.
Driest place in the country, look at it.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Have to be able to pivot, so I've got to get my head around the new challenge. Things have been getting a bit slower and rougher this afternoon. There's so many camels around, so it's just messed up the track. I have to focus so hard on trying to just stay on the bike, keep moving forwards, keep myself and the bike in one piece. Definitely busted it.
There's going to be hard days and good days. You just got to ride the tough ones out.
The white men just came and grabbed all the kids and took them away.
I'm just cycling up a part of the rabbit-proof fence as a token, just to remember those kids, and in particular the stolen generation. The memories that stay with me are not the bad ones. I'm loving this ride. I'm moving along so much better now. Heading into the final week of this journey. Here at Shark Bay, and this is incredible. I really just love traveling by bike. It gives an incredible connection with the people on the land.
All right. So big shout out to Kate for joining us last night in our world's most exciting classroom event for Australia and New Zealand classrooms in that area of the world. She's gearing up for another expedition. She'll actually be leaving in a month or two, and she will be going through a part of the world that you don't always hear about in the news. She'll be going through places like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. She'll also go into Afghanistan. So it's a big group of countries kind of in that Central Asian area that she's going to cycle through. It's going to be a pretty big expedition, and we'll likely, hopefully, if we can get the satellite technology, be able to join her live from the field while she's on that expedition, which would be pretty cool. If you do have any questions for Kate, I'm going to share a link here. If you go to an email, classroom@darwin200.com, any questions that you might have for Kate about the journey she is coming up, about cycling across Australia and other places around the world, don't hesitate to send those questions, and I'll forward them on to Kate. And then she'll hopefully email you back with some answers. I know she will. She'll be excited to see some questions. So classroom@darwin200.com, we'll see those and we'll pass them on. So 2 weeks ago, we had an experiment. Looking at ocean acidification, the impact that it has. So we had a flask of water, a flask of vinegar, and we were putting shells inside of there to see what would happen to those shells, to try and mimic what's happening in our ocean right now with things becoming more acidic. So let's take a look at the answer to that experiment, to that results video. So that should load up for you right about now.
So what did your shells do? Did you also find that the shell that you put in vinegar decreased in weight, whereas the one that you put in water stayed exactly the same? Did you manage to answer the 3 research questions? The first question asked what happened in the experiment. As the shells are made of calcium carbonate, which reacts with acid, by putting it in the vinegar, some of the calcium carbonate reacted and dissolved away. And that explains why the shell that we've taken out of the vinegar weighs less than when we put it in. Some of the shell has reacted with the acid. The second question was, what was the gas we saw bubbling from the shells? Well, the answer to that was carbon dioxide. The reaction between the acid and the calcium carbonate releases carbon dioxide that bubbles back up to the surface. The last question asked what was the impact on the marine life in the world's oceans. Well, unfortunately, as the world's ocean's acidity increases, it can actually kill some marine organisms and damage others. This is because, as we've seen with the shells, the increasing acidity of the world's oceans dissolves the calcium carbonate, making the exoskeletons and bones of marine life more and more fragile. When we tested the pH of the vinegar, we saw that it was very, very acidic. Of course, the oceans are nowhere near as acidic in real life, but nevertheless, as they increase in acidity, this process that we've seen in this experiment acts on all of the different marine animals, including the mollusks and seashells out in the world's oceans. So, as the acidity increases, the more calcium carbonate will dissolve and bubble away, making the marine life more and more vulnerable. A big thank you to everyone who took part and uploaded results. Let's see the winning entries to this experiment.
Okay, so we did have some great results come in from the experiments. So just a reminder that when we do an experiment, every week we have a new one. Then your class has 2 weeks to try it, take some photos, answer the questions if there's any questions that go along with the experiment, and then send your answers to us at classroom@darwin200.com. And we pick a few classrooms for a Amazon gift card each week. So let me load up really quickly here. Hopefully these pictures will open for me. There's a classroom, Miss Lightburn's crew in Nova Scotia, and Miss Roll's crew in the UK both tried the experiment, sent in some great pictures and answers to their questions. Let me share my screen and see if I can get a couple of those pictures up here for us. There we go. So here you can see shells having been selected and being weighed. So you weigh them before they go into the water and the vinegar, and then you weigh them after. Here's a shot of some of the shells. So here's just in water, and look at the way this one's bubbling away in the vinegar as the acid is slowly dissolving it. A couple more pictures here. Here's the classroom holding up some of their answers for the 3 questions that we had, which was really cool. And there's one more. You can see the shell in the vinegar is really starting to dissolve, whereas the one in the water isn't really having that happen. So this is a great experiment that really illustrates what's happening in our oceans right now. As our oceans become more acidic, as more carbon and dioxide enters our oceans, it's having a huge impact on creatures that need shells, that form shells. They dissolve, they slowly break down. It has a huge impact on corals. So as our ocean continues to become more acidic, we are going to see a greater impact on things like our mollusks, on our corals and marine life like that. Very cool. So shout out to those classrooms. We have a brand new experiment for this week looking at amber. So I'm going to share that. We'll take a look at the experiment, and then I will tell your classrooms how you can take part.
Welcome back, everyone. In today's experiment, we're going to create our very own fossils in amber. Amber is the most incredible substance. It's tree resin that dripped down the trunks or branches of a tree millions of years ago and slowly became fossilized. In many cases, insects and even small reptiles and other creatures can be trapped in amber. This gives us a unique glimpse of prehistoric life in a way that regular fossils can't give us. If you look deeply into these pieces here, you can see all manner of small flies and insects and other creatures. The detail of preservation is even greater than regular fossils in stone, and in some cases, even the colour of that ancient animal is perfectly preserved. And it's not just insects that have been preserved in amber. Often parts of plants have been preserved, and in really rare cases, even whole lizards. And even resin. This comes in 2 parts. When you mix the 2 parts together, they solidify. This will stand in as your amber. You then need a cup to mix the resin in, 2 small toy creatures that will be your fossils in your resin, and last but not least, some moulds to pour your resin into. And if you'd like to, you can add some resin dye to really make your resin realistic and look just like real amber. Okay, let's get started. So the first step is to measure out exactly equal quantities of the 2 parts of the epoxy resin. Do this under the supervision of a responsible adult because the resin is harmful if it's ingested. There we go. It's best pouring this into a paper cup because once the 2 parts of the resin mix, it becomes very sticky and very difficult to remove. So it's best to do this in a disposable cup rather than ruining your mother's best chinaware. And this is the second part. We'll measure out exactly the same quantity. There we go. And we'll pour that into our cup. Once you've mixed the 2 parts of your epoxy resin, you can add some colouring if you want to mimic that beautiful golden colour of real amber. I've got some yellow resin colouring. I'm going to add a few drops of this. And you're then ready to mix your resin, get it ready to set. Make sure to mix your resin really, really thoroughly. If you don't mix it well enough, it won't set. Generally, you need to mix it for at least 2 to 3 minutes in order to get the two parts properly combined. Then you're ready to pour your resin into molds. I've chosen 2 molds, a round one and a square one. And I've got these 2 little beetles to represent my 2 animals that'll be fossilized in my amber. It's best to pour in a bit of resin into the molds before you put your creature inside. That ensures that all parts of the mold are properly covered in resin. So I'm going to pour in a little bit into both molds. And the really good thing, of course, about having this paper cup is you can bend it and make sure that it pours really perfectly into those molds. Be really careful because the resin is so sticky, and especially clothing. If you get it in any fabrics, it will not come out. We're now ready to put in our fossilized animals. So I'm going to put in this red beetle into this round mold, and this beautiful green beetle into this square one. You can then top up both molds with a bit more resin. Pour a little bit more into here. You then have to leave the molds for about 48 hours to allow the resin to fully set and harden. Join me in 2 weeks' time to find out how my creatures in amber turn out. Good luck in replicating this experiment, and thank you for watching.
All right, so I'm sure many of you have seen Jurassic Park. You know how important it was that they found those insects trapped in the resin, and it's something that really actually happens, which is pretty cool. You can find examples, even purchase things, maybe Amazon or eBay. You can find insects in in amber. And for this week's experiment, you need the resin. It comes in 2 parts, the A and the B, the resin epoxy, a container, and then whatever you want to put in. Maybe it's a little plastic lizard or an insect, plastic insect or something like that. It is available on Amazon, and I think the A and the B, you can get them in bottles for less than $20 if you want to try it in your classroom or you want to try it at home. But you have 2 weeks if you want to try it. Send in some pictures to classroom@darwin200.com, and we will pick some classrooms to send some prizes to. So we'd love to see some pictures of your homemade amber and what you decide to put inside that homemade amber. Okay. Well, last night we met a Darwin leader. Darwin leaders are youth between 18 to 25 who join us in ports all around the world. We match them up with conservation groups, and they go out into the field with a camera operator. They learn about the issue. They create videos, 3 videos, in fact, to highlight the issue, what's being done, and then to think about the future. What can be done to protect the species or the ecosystem more? So as I mentioned, Brigida joined us in New South Wales. Was out in the field looking for gliders. So let's take a look at my little chat with Brigida last night. Brigida Ganawan joining us. She was a Darwin leader in Sydney when we were in Sydney, Australia, and she got to get out in New South Wales and work on a really cool project. I'm not going to tell you about it now. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about it. So I'm going to bring Brigida in right now. Here we go. Hey, Brigida, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Brigida, it's so great to have you live with us today. For the students tuning in who might not know about Darwin Leaders, every port that we stop in, we try to bring in young conservationists from around the world. They get to come see the ship, be connected with a local conservation organization, work in the field with them for a few days with a camera operator as well, and then make a series of videos to highlight their experience, the conservation issue, what's being done, and what could be done in the future. So, Brigida, I think it would be awesome if you maybe kind of introduce yourself and told us a bit a bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Brigitte. I am originally from Indonesia, so I'm currently a Bachelor of Science student, and I was already studying in Australia, actually, in Melbourne. But I got to go on the ship for a bit and also do my little expedition with DARWIN200 down in Sydney. And I was put right outside my comfort zone. I really loved the whole experience, but the reason I'm saying this is because my background is in marine conservation, and that entails scuba diving and doing scientific data for coral reefs. And in this project, I was put into a terrestrial project. We went up to the Wombeyan Caves. It was about 3 hours from the city. And we were looking for nocturnal mammals, which means we were out at midnight and in areas where there was no signal. And obviously, it was very exciting, but also nerve-wracking. But it was such an experience that I couldn't forget. We spent 3 days out in the field, and it was nice to be partnered with a camera operator and looking into a species that I hadn't heard or seen before, and eventually finding them in person, these endangered greater gliders. So the species I was studying was the greater gliders, and these are nocturnal mammals. They live in old-growth eucalypt forests, and they were almost like koalas, the best way to describe it. But they can glide up to 100 meters with just one jump. So they were such an amazing way for me to explore terrestrial spaces, and I'd never been outside of Melbourne before, so this was my next best Australian trip, and yeah, really connected with my fellow Darwin 200 leaders as well. So I'd be happy to answer anything about it.
Awesome. Well, Brigitte, your camera operator, I believe, was Josh, who's joined us in several events as the ship was making its way around Tasmania, making its way to New Zealand. So the students probably might be familiar with Josh. I have the very first video that the two of you made together. So let's play that, and we'll see if any students have questions for us.
Sounds good.
All right. Bear with me for one moment while it loads on my end, and then we're good to go. Here we go.
We live in an incredibly fragmented world. Too often, we find ourselves working in isolation, insinuating gaps in a once interconnected ecosystem. This fragmentation not only affects us, but also the animals we share our world with.
My name is Brigitte Gunawan from Indonesia. I am a DARWIN200 leader here in Australia, conserving greater gliders in the Great Eastern Ranges.
Greater gliders are one of the world's largest gliding mammals, found high in the canopies of eucalypt forests in eastern Australia. They have a membrane of thin skin between their front and hind legs that can be folded out to serve as a parachute, giving the animals the remarkable ability to glide distances of up to 100 meters in a search for food and nesting hollows.
A really beautiful animal. It's a big tree-dwelling animal, the beautiful long fluffy tail, which doesn't, as far as we can tell, have a call that you can hear, so you don't hear them chattering in the treetops.
Yet their population has declined by 80% in the last 20 years. The Black Summer bushfires of 2019 and 2020 resulted in an estimated 60% decline in the number of species in the Greater Blue Mountains, listing them as endangered.
The wider Great Eastern Ranges region is suffering from quite a number of threats that are impacting directly upon our beautiful glider species. They include ongoing effects from past habitat fragmentation, the loss of large trees, particularly ancient trees that have big hollows that can take several hundred years to develop, and also the intensive fires that we've experienced in recent years.
But they require a large hollow in the tree to be able to survive. They require a particular age of the leaves on the trees to be able to feed healthily, so the young leaves at the tops of the trees are what they prefer. And we have had times during drought when lots of these animals have fallen out of trees because they've starved when there's no new regrowth on the trees.
Well-established forests are their primary ecosystems, and the more that we manipulate these forests and create breakages to them, it means that they're more and more found in urban areas, that they are getting embroiled in barbed wires. They're seeing predators like cats and foxes, and then that increases competition and stress to those populations as well.
We joined a team of ecologists for a spotlighting session where they used red torches to search for nocturnal mammals at night. Very quickly, we spotted something. A brush-tailed possum. Nice to see, but not what we were looking for. We took a record of the sighting and moved on. But it wasn't long before we saw yet another possum. And another. It seemed that in order for us to find the greater gliders, we needed a modern approach. So we met with Adrian, a thermal drone pilot.
The thermal drones are really effective because in the past, when we've been looking for these arboreal animals, they're quite cryptic, they're hard to find. So what the thermal does is it gives you this ability to find the animals in a way that is so unique, because every mammal has a heat signature. And when you can get above the canopy, you can really look down and find all the animals where they are. We found that you can cover so much more ground than you can when you're doing spotlighting. So whereas you used to need about 6 ecologists in a few weeks to cover hundreds of hectares, you can get one drone operator to cover that same amount of ground within 1 or 2 nights.
It didn't take long for us to find our first greater glider. The first of many.
And whenever we did see a heat signature, we would stop the drone and then change it over to colour imagery and then shine a spotlight on it so that we could see exactly what it is we're looking at. And we were able to find roughly 50 greater gliders over 50 hectares last night.
Nicely done.
Cheers.
Now that we knew where they were, it was time to head out and find them ourselves. And just as we expected, bingo. But we didn't just find one greater glider. We found up to 8 that night. Seeing gliders in this density proves that this species and many others can thrive in properly managed areas. In the next episode, we will meet the people working hard to ensure gliders have plenty of places to not just survive, but thrive throughout Australia.
All right. So Brigitte, one of many Darwin projects in Australia, we did everything from climbing some of the tallest trees in the world in Tasmania to out looking at humpback whales, looking at green sea turtles in northern New South Wales, koalas. So we had a lot. Platypus, that was a fun one. We had a lot of great Darwin leaders with us while the ship was in Sydney and Hobart in Tasmania. And Brigitte is the first story that we've shared so far, and we'll have many more to share in the coming weeks. So to wrap up for today, really quickly, our curiosities of the week. So last week, this was our curiosity. You had a week to think about what this was and send in your answer. You can tell it's fossilized. It looks like a shell. If I open it up, this one's been cut in half. You can see what it looks like inside. You can see it's been crystallized inside as well. So the answer to this week's curiosity is this is an ammonite. So this ammonite is a fossil. This was found in Madagascar and is probably somewhere between 100 to 110 million years old. So just to tell you a little bit more briefly about ammonites, they are a mollusk. So from the cephalopods, like our current nautilus, like our squid, like our octopus. And they were around during the Jurassic and Cretaceous period, so when dinosaurs were roaming the earth, and for about a period of 140 million years before they went extinct, which is, yeah, so they're around for a while, but then like many other animal species, we did lose them to extinction, and that happens naturally. That's something that happens naturally on our planet. Different times it happens at faster rates, depending on what's going on. And so the creature would have lived inside of this front portion, and then the rest of it would have been chambers full of gas and fluid, and the amount of which could be altered to rise and sink in the water column. So that was our curiosity of the week, was an ammonite, and it's just over 100 million years old, this fossil. So we have to get to our brand new curiosity of the week, and Stu in the Darwin studio in the UK sent me one that we could use. So I'm going to share that with you, and then we'll sign off for today. So here is our brand new curiosity coming your way.
Welcome back, everyone. For this week's curiosity, I have a type of fossil, but can you work out what this is, what animal it comes from? This is a very difficult curiosity to identify, but the clue is in this pattern of these veins within the fossil itself. I'll give you another clue as well. This is actually a slice through a much larger object. Can you work out what might have these veins running through it? What do you think this might be? Send in your best guess to classroom@darwin200.com for a chance to win an Amazon gift voucher prize. Thank you for watching and good luck in taking part. See you next week to find out the answer.
All right, so Stu wasn't messing around this week. This is a tricky one. He did give you some pretty good clues that it is a fossil. He gave you another clue that it's a cut or a cross-section from a larger fossil. So take your best guesses, try and do a little bit of research. Maybe that pattern in the fossil will help, and try to think about what animal that fossil could have come from, what part of that animal that fossil may have been. So you have 1 week to send in your best guesses to classroom@darwin200.com, classroom@darwin200.com for your guesses for the curiosity of week. 2 weeks to try the new experiment, making your own amber. Send in some pictures so we can see what you put inside that amber to classroom@darwin200.com as well. So a huge shout out to our classrooms who joined us today. Thank you so much for being with us on YouTube as well as backstage. We've got a couple still hanging out with us. There they are. So our crew in Portugal, as well as the Phoenix School. I believe they're in New England. So great to have them hanging out with us here today. And then, yeah, next week we'll do this all again. Our 72nd World's Most Exciting Classroom. Hopefully we'll be able to share some content from the Falklands, which is where the ship will be. It's a little tricky with the satellite right now because they just turned off Starlink in the Falklands. So we'll see what we're able to do next week and if we're able to have that live connection, but we'll still have our classroom event. We'll still have lots of stuff going on. a huge shout out to our sponsors, our supporters, and our partners, without whom we wouldn't be sailing across the world, having the world's most exciting classroom, having our young Darwin leaders join us in the ports, or doing the research that we're doing as the Oosterschelde sails around the world. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks to the students who will tune into the recording over the course of the week. And yeah, we'll see you all again next week.